All right, so today we will be talking about Chapter 10, Using Language Effectively. For our informative speech, you guys know we were challenged to paint this picture for our audience, right? And we did this without even being able to physically show images. And this worked because words are symbols. Now, obviously, there are a bunch of theories we can talk about, but you know this was effective for us to paint this picture for our audience, and we couldn't show images. So with that, our words are obviously important. They have a lot of meaning, so we want to pay a lot of attention, especially when we're talking about speaking to our audience and reaching them effectively. And we can think about this when we talk about definitions. So recall from a few chapters ago, we talked about the difference from denotative and connotative. You guys remember that? What's denotative? Okay, denotative is the dictionary version. Remember that? So that's, if we're trying to define a word, we look at Webster, Merriam, whatever we usually do to find the definition of a word. That's the agreed upon meaning. Connotative, on the other hand, this is the symbolic way that we explain a word, right? So it's effective, and we can understand by the way we describe it with symbols, even though we might not find that exact definition inside the dictionary. Does that make sense? Okay. There are other fundamentals of language besides denotative and connotative. They are, language is ambiguous. This means that words have multiple meanings. For example, if I said, each of us saw her duck. Now, I could be referring to the actual animal, quack, quack, duck, or her duck like she kneeled or crouched down, right? So that one word can have several meanings. Another fundamental of language is that it is abstract. Words can represent multiple things. If I said tree, I could be talking about a Christmas tree. I could be referring to a family tree, or I could be referring to the outside tree, whatever you call that, right? So this one word represents multiple things. Language is also active. And this means that words develop as we experience different things. So for example, think about at least 10 years ago when Facebook wasn't a thing, befriend wouldn't have been as significant as it is now. Or email, for example, before we were born, and email wasn't created. If I said spam, you may think about the lunch meat that's in can, right? That food. But now the first thing we'll probably think about is the spam in your email, because it changes as we experience new things. Finally, language is arbitrary. What do I mean when I say language is arbitrary? Question number one. Rachel?
The words don't have a clear definition.
Okay, the words don't have a clear definition. What else? Chelsea?
There's no direct connection between the object and the word that you're using to define the object.
Exactly. So both of those things are right. When we say language is arbitrary, that means it's subject to individual judgment. Think about the fact that some of us speak different languages. So words may not even be the same thing, or how we pronounce things, or the way we describe a word. For example, I think the book talked about in Dutch, the word tree means boom. But in the US, if I said boom, what would you guys think of?
A bomb.
A bomb, right? A noise or an explosion. Good. Or, here's another example. If I said, the sky is clear, what does that mean? What do you think about?
Clouds, blue outside.
Okay, so it's sunny, it's not raining, it's not going to storm. What about a glass is clear?
It's see-through.
Okay, so transparent, or what else do we think about if a glass is clear? Plain, or even empty, right? There's nothing inside. Finally, the road is clear.
There's no cars on the road.
No traffic, and it'll be a smooth trip, right? If we say the road is clear. Good. So this one word can mean several different things, right? So those are the fundamentals of language. And with that, it's obviously easy to misunderstand or misinterpret someone, right? Can someone tell me a time when, considering the fundamentals of language, they had a misunderstanding or miscommunication with someone? Right, so that one thing, represents that drink. Okay, so also the book talked about the way that spoken language differs from written language. Someone give me one of those. And this is also on page 204 and 205 if you're following in the book. Go for it.
Spoken language is immediate, so whenever you are speaking, that message is conveyed right away.
Exactly. Versus like written language is even a text message, you can come back to that later, right? And you can refer back to it. But when you're speaking, they're receiving that message right away. And you can also observe their nonverbal behaviors versus if it was written. Direct?
Informal versus formal.
Mm-hmm. So which one is, do you know? Do you remember which one is informal?
Informal is like how we talk to our friends and stuff. And like formal is how I would talk if I wanted to like get an interview with somebody.
Exactly. I think we have one more. So speaking is more rhythmic and has a flow, and that helps listeners interpret the message better. And that's what we do when we're giving a speech, right? So there's one thing when I'm reading your outline and I can have a sense of a story, but it sounds even better when you're in front of the class and you're using this rhythmic kind of language and maybe even some kind of poetic flow, right? And that's obviously easier done when you're speaking. Okay, so we know that written language is different from spoken language. We know that it's important. But what can we do, especially when we're trying to reach our speakers? Not reach our speakers, sorry. As a speaker, we're trying to reach our audience. So question number 4 talks about the 5 guidelines for audience-centered language. What's one of those guidelines? Yeah, Chelsea.
Personalizing the language, so using we or us, or referring to yourself saying I, and things like that.
Good example, especially when you're trying to connect to the audience and you want them to feel like your topic is relevant to them. Personalizing your language is a good step. What's another guideline? Teray?
Put your language in like context by using location.
Yep, so physical, time, year, location, anything that can make it more obvious what you're referring to. And again, that lets the audience know that they can feel more connected to your topic. It's another guideline.
Spark imagination with your language.
Okay, so sparking imagination. We already talked about that's often done with storytelling. And it's a way to get the audience interested, sharing a story, using specific examples. Even humor is a good strategy to spark imagination. Similar to that, using visual language, parallelism, similes, metaphors, all of these things make your points easier to come across.
And I think the last one, like using
Inclusive language. This is just saying that we should avoid any kind of sexist language, especially considering, what time we're in and times are changing, right? So you want to be mindful of including everyone. Just by saying one word can immediately disconnect you from several members of your audience. For example, on page 203, there's a chart and they give you common words that we're all probably used to using and substitute. So for example, mankind is one that I think we've all used so often, but now the suggestion is to say humankind, and that makes everyone more inclusive. Also, I'm guilty of this, but saying a male nurse, when that profession, it is often dominated by women, but to say male nurse, you're excluding them or you're making them feel like they're different from everyone else, right? So it's just important for us to use inclusive language. All of these things are guidelines that you guys can keep and take into consideration for your persuasive speech, and it'll make you that much more connected to your audience and help them to be even more connected to your topic. So let's get some practice with this. We will do a quick activity.